Are your people working hard but not reaching their full potential? The problem is not effort, it is development. At the Modern Observer Group, we transform workforce development into real performance. Our human-centered achievement programs help your team think better, communicate stronger, and execute at a higher level. That means higher employee engagement, stronger leadership, and measurable results across your organization. If you want a workforce that performs, leads, and delivers, it is time to invest in your people. Visit modernobserver.com and discover how the Modern Observer Group helps you build a workforce that wins.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Correll, and I'm here with Jan Jeremias. The two of us are partners in this life, empowering uh, the entire planet, if possible. That's the goal. And maybe it's one person at a time, and maybe it's small groups at a time. We're really just having these weekly conversations to kick around things in our life that are going on for us. And at the same time, bringing some experience from lives well lived on both of our parts to really hopefully bring some thoughts and insights to you that will be meaningful and may actually make a difference for you. So that's a long-winded welcome. How are you doing today, Jan?
I'm all right, Bill. Yeah, just my at the moment, one moment, one day at a time.
That's the best way to live, actually. If you think about the definition of present and mindfulness and all that other good stuff, this is all we know we're going to get right now, this right here. And I love Jesus Jones' line when he said, right here, right now, there's no other place I'd rather be,
Mm-hmm. And one moment, one day, or one breath.
Exactly.
One breath at a time. So that's the way my day is today.
Yeah, and I can remember some conversations that we used to have about that. And it was like, what if you're in pain? Well, thank God you're in pain. You're still here, What if the pain never goes away? How will you know until it happens? It's kind of like you've got a choice in every moment to worry about the future, regret the past, or just see what the hell's going on in the world right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, absolutely. I mean, see what's going on in your own world right now, like
Yeah.
in your own, in your own world, and not in a I don't. I think I always took that phrase or I know people who take that phrase as being very self-centered or very self-absorbed, but it's really not about that. It's can I be one with whatever is going on right now, from, how I feel physically to where I am to what, for me, Tonka being here, can I be one with that? So I'm present for whatever it is, wherever I am, if I'm, so that's a much better place to navigate from.
I completely agree with you. You're thinking of in terms of the term empowerment or power has to do with an ability to act in a positive manner, for outcomes that you'd like to see. And it has no guarantee that the outcomes will be there, but you are in a position where you can take action in the areas that you see needing it. So for all of us, there are areas in our lives they could use a little bit of attention, shall we say. Sometimes it's health. Sometimes it's, physical fitness. Other times it's relationships with loved ones. Sometimes it's just a simple, like what's going on financially, and sometimes it's all of those. And there at times can be these moments where any one of them or two or three or even five of them at a time would be manageable, not fun, but you could probably gamify it with a little bit of work. And then you hit those moments where even three of them are too large. There's no possibility present. There's no vision of a potential empowered outcome, if you will. So what do we do when that happens?
It's a really good question. I was listening to something recently, and he said like phrases like God only gives you as much as you can handle always annoyed him, because he said that was kind of like, well, how do you know? Like, I mean, you get to a point sometimes where you're like, and yes, you make it through or whatever, or something happened and somehow whatever, but I don't know, it was, and I could so resonate with that phrase and that annoyance, like, with that phrase. And but I guess the question is like, what do you do? And that is to me like, well, first of all, it depends on the situation, but it could be anything. Could be call a friend, could be get outside when you feel like life is too overwhelming. Could be take a nap,
Yeah.
like for 20 minutes and see if you get up in a better mood, listen to some music. Um, you know, call someone and tell them you need a hug, like, I mean, really like anything that's gonna make you feel better, or what we might call self-soothe, like anything that's going to just give you a reason, and I say that with, the utmost respect, and give you a reason to go on for another moment, because I think sometimes that's the way it feels.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of like what your friend said from the standpoint of, there's a at merciness there that God only gives you what you can handle. Well, he's far too busy with other people. Okay. What he did do is he designed you so that you could handle what comes. And that's a lot more, in my mind, it's a lot more powerful to consider. I was built for this. I've just not faced this before. And, I've gotten through everything else successfully. So why not this too? When it all comes down to at the end of the day is in those moments, having a state where you see no possibility, are you willing and interested to change your state of mind? Are you willing and interested to do it yourself? Because quite frankly, once you've jumped out of the airplane, the choice to pull the ripcord is yours.
Eh, that's what we're actually, Mary Jane and I are talking about on Friday, is actually, and that's what our posts are about this week, or about choice. And that was our post was about today, was
Yeah.
like, it is about a choice. And it's whether you want to say it's like it's your choice to stay in the same mindset. Well, it's like you have a conversation with somebody. It's your choice whether you respond or whether you react. It's, you get up and you, like I said, I was feeling off. So maybe it's a choice. You're like, okay, well, I make a choice of what I want to do today or what I should get done, and whether today's more of a rest day since I worked the entire weekend. And so, that's a choice that I need to make. And and it's also, if we take a breath, and it's a conscious choice. It's not a reactionary choice. It's kind of like, okay, ask yourself the question, what do I need right now? What do I need right now? And then go from that choice. Oh, okay, this is what I need right now.
Perfect. And most struggle and pain comes from indecision. It comes from, dwelling in a situation that's uncomfortable. Most of it's mental, but let's say some of it's physical. Um, and a failure to make a difference with making a decision in that moment. If you stop and think about it for a second, once you've decided something in your life, there's like an ease that comes after that. even though nothing's happened, nothing's changed other than the fact that you've said, I am going to do this. I'm going to pull this damn ripcord now, and we'll see what happens. There's a really powerful exercise, that I learned in the Landmark Forum. We're talking about, uh, how we live in a world where there's an either or. Okay. So, for example, we'll talk about ice cream. What's your favorite kind of ice cream? Oh, I like vanilla. Oh, I like chocolate. Okay. So we put two fists out and we say vanilla, chocolate, choose. So the person interacting chooses either the right hand or the left hand. Oh, good. You chose vanilla. Let's do it again. Vanilla, chocolate, choose. Chooses the other hand. It's chocolate this time. Great. Great. So you've got a little depth and you've got a little variety in your life. You've got some chocolate there now too. Then he says, chocolate, choose. What? There's no choice. Yes, you can either choose the chocolate or you can choose the story about there being no choice. The story in your head that's saying other than what's real. And, to me, that conversation was 30 years ago, but still very powerful in my life when I'm awake and I can remember it. Or I've got brilliant people around me who can basically say, choose chocolate, Bill.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you said, because I was thinking about it, and I think is if we can get out of the way of getting, and that reminds me of getting that, to me is also the story is reminding me is getting trapped in the ego, is getting trapped in the, I don't know, whatever it is, the ego self, the one that, has this idea of who you should be, what you should be,
Right.
how you should act, attached to the fact that, oh my gosh, I only like chocolate, and isn't open to like the other flavors. And by the way, I like coffee.
Me too.
Coffee ice cream.
Given the three of them to choose from, I'll choose coffee.
Me too. Um, and so, so it's that idea of like, do I identify with something so much that there's no room for anything else? Like, and do I like, I'm only like, I'm a coffee lover, kind of thing. And then I'm so closed off, or am I like this? And this is the way I tend to act or navigate the world. And so there's no flexibility or room for anything else. Because then I think your choices get very limited.
Well, like they're none. There's not even one to choose from, when you're in the middle of all of it. It's just like, this is how it is. And so being awake enough to understand your own responses and your own emotional processing of whatever's going on at the moment, it takes somebody who's a smarter than the average bear paying attention to their own life. Like you said, the ego-based stuff is usually invisible to people. It's usually they just respond. And that's the only way that they can think to respond. Otherwise, they would have responded differently, right? So what's your problem with how I responded? I'm perfectly fine with how I responded. What's your problem? And there's nobody else there. They're still having an argument as if there were somebody else there. I don't know. Maybe they're talking to God because God never gives you more than you can handle, right?
Maybe they are. Um, maybe they are. Um, yeah, it is very interesting. First of all, when you said there is no choice, and that's so true, because when you're so wrapped up into one idea or one way of thinking, there's no choice. Like,
Yes.
there's no breathing room at all. We have that problem now in the world with people being very invested in their way of thinking.
Interesting languaging. Invested assumes that there was a choice in putting it there in my vernacular,
Possibly. You know, um, sometimes I don't know that there was any like I don't know that there was much of a choice. I think it was the information, like I don't want to say information, it was the dialogue they were fed. And that could be, I mean, that is information. And that could be information from others, or could be information from society, that this their society or whatever. But I don't really know that. I do think that that isn't like it becomes like they're invested in it because they would have to question, or they would have to navigate the feeling of not belonging to whoever they feel like they belong to. Thinking different requires the element of having the courage to stand outside um, that which you're familiar with, or that which you believe, and be okay with it. Like, I listened to a wonderful recording that Brene Brown gave about it. And, she was saying that, it takes courage to basically stand on your own and voice your own opinion. And, to realize that, you possibly are not saying what everybody else is saying, and not thinking what everybody else is thinking.
Sure. Sure. Going back to what you were saying about investment, um, I think our culture has pretty much programmed us that the right thing to do is if someone finds fault with you, be ready to defend what you do as if it were your choice, as opposed to you have habits. These are the habits you've got now. This is how you respond to things given those habits for whatever reason that you have them. But I'm going to tell you that most people are completely reasonable with what doesn't work about them, and they've got damn good reasons for it. Have you ever heard that? Well, why that is because when I was married to so and so, he used to say this, and now that he's not here anymore, everything that sounds like him makes me react that way, as if it's etched in stone, steel plated, and it can never change. And the thinking person who can open their eyes and mind and say, I'm at the level of pain right now. I got nothing in terms of anything I can grab onto except for I'm in extreme pain. Now what? So the now what gives you the opportunity to kind of twist it around and look at it for a second. And then Brene Brown saying that it takes courage, to speak your own mind. It also takes a really awake human being to have a mind to speak. Because mostly what we speak is other people's minds, and we take credit for it, good, bad, or indifferent. And we got good reasons why it's our opinion until we change it. So people who have gone through intense training, who have decided this is an important thing in their life, and this is how they want to respond to the world, and that's to respond to it in a, really a cognitive, understood, well thought out, contemplated sort of a way, as opposed to having the same answer all the time. Because the world is not an objective test. The world really, really demands essays. It does not demand one of your pre-programmed 5 or 6 answers.
I think the one thing that came to mind when you were speaking, Bill, was that, whatever. So someone reacts a certain way or behaves a particular way and then explains it away. And I think to me, what happens is you think because you've explained it away that all of a sudden it makes that behavior acceptable.
Yes.
When, yes, you have a good reason for it, but no matter what you do, that behavior is not acceptable. And they've missed that kind of point and they haven't taken responsibility for it on top of it. So then all of a sudden that behavior has become acceptable. Well, no matter what you do, it's not acceptable. It's just that you have a reason that you did it. And then because you've had this idea that, okay, well, now since I explained myself away, it's acceptable behavior, then there's no responsibility and you go on doing the same thing. I think if you finally acknowledge, okay, well, I yelled at that person. That was that was not right. And then you will say, okay, well, I yelled at you because I got this really upsetting phone call and I was so upset or whatever. And okay, you explained why, but then you do have to apologize to that person and say, really wasn't your fault and you called at the wrong time and I'm really sorry that you were the brunt of my reactionary outburst kind of thing. But you sit there and you acknowledge it. I think people have jumped and said, okay, well, because, you know, my spouse treated me badly and said this to me, now I react every single time. Yes, you have every right to react that way, and it's understandable that you would. But you also have to take ownership for it and say, oh my gosh, eventually you're like, okay, well, I've got to get a grip and realize, you look at situations where you get triggered or you start to react and you start to say to yourself, okay, well, I don't want to go through life reacting like that. Or even if you do, I want to own it and say, okay, well, I'm really sorry, because sometimes you react so quickly you don't even realize. And then you're like, oh my gosh.
What's interesting about that is that our culture, again, it's kind of like in everything that we say, you and I, until we question it, and then we may come up with something else. But hopefully, at the end of a long conversation, we've got a little bit more than where we started with just what the culture gave us. And I would say that I kind of agree with you, and in the way that I hear people giving excuses and expecting you to live with that because they're not going to do anything else with it, not being really intentionally responsible. I think that people are getting tired of hearing "I'm sorry" in the face of repeated bad behavior. And when it comes right down to it, if you're going to say "I'm sorry," find other words to put it into. You know, you can say something like, "Boy, my behavior with you right now is completely inappropriate. You don't deserve it at all. And I think a lot more of you than that. And for that reason, I'd ask you to give me another chance. I don't deserve it based on what I just did with you, but I'd ask you to give me another chance." Does that work for you?
No, first of all, yeah, I like it, Bill. I think that, even if you do say you're sorry, whatever words you decide to use,
Right.
um, I think I think even just the words of saying, of acknowledging the fact that it wasn't acceptable, whatever you did, you know, um, is a step forward because I don't think there's any element of taking responsibility or of acknowledgement. There is that, like I said, there's we've gotten very into explaining, and I'm not saying that's wrong because I think people have to realize why people might do something, might be, upset by someone, even though, from a past situation. I think that's important. But personally, but I think that you do have to kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, well, I almost think of it like I'm a grown up now and I have to get beyond the tantrum. Because that's that's how it feels sometimes. It's not like it's like you're having a tantrum.
Exactly. And tantrums are indefensible with a story. They're they're unacceptable at any level, and no amount of storytelling makes it better in the listener's ear. As much as it's important for us to get it off of our chest so that we can justify to ourselves that this is an act of a bad person and I'm not a bad person because I'm justified in how I inappropriately just behaved. And I actually have to tell this story so I can hear it. This is not for you. You just happen to be standing there through this entire tantrum and everything else. I'm just really kind of left with an idea that, you know, in life, there are two things happening in the present. It's either what happens or your story about what happens. And if you're looking to upgrade to what takes care of the person who you are concerned that you have mishandled or mistreated, then being more interested in what they need in the moment than your need to tell them why, because they just don't care. You just hit them in the face with a brick. They're more interested now in, can I trust you again?
I think it
It's not a
depends.
level.
I think
Go
it
ahead.
depends on who it is. I think if it's a loved one or a good friend and you react like that, they're like they are interested in what happened and and everything. I think if it's, and maybe sometimes and maybe that's dependent also where they are on that day.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as cut and dry to say it's like, they're not interested. I think that, you know, depending on where the person who's on the receiving end is on that day, then some days, like, somebody may react and be nasty to me, and I might have all the compassion and understanding in the world. And on another day, well, let's say I'm not feeling particularly, I don't know, well, I'll just like, well, is like, whether that be mind, body, spirit, whatever it is, well,
Yeah.
maybe I cannot handle the brunt of their conversation. And then no matter what they tell me, I'm just, they could say anything. They could, they could say this is the reason, and then maybe I'm not willing to hear it. And some of that's a personality thing or whatever. Also, I mean, I think I tend to be very open and kind of understanding of people, but I mean, that might be a misconception on my part. I hope that's how I am. But
All I can tell you is that in the moment when something really heinous has just occurred and you're the perpetrator of the heinous behavior, well, I love what you said. It depends on what the other person needs. So I'm coming from the standpoint of, if you're talking, you're not listening. So an immediate, I would really like to recall that last communication because that sucked.
I know, right? No, exactly, exactly. It's always like the whatever. That really didn't come out the way it sounded.
No, it
Wanted it
left here and
to.
something happened on the way.
That's right. It's almost like, oh my gosh, like, it's like when the words fly out of your mouth and you're like, did I really say that? Or did I say it the way that it came out or whatever? And I think as we're talking about that, I think that's very easy to do
Yes.
and things like texting and social media too, because
Oh,
I mean, it's so like there's no, and even in society now, like as I go out, like there's no kind of, and I find myself doing this, I'll be out and then all of a sudden you just ask for something. Like you don't say hello, you don't say anything. And then, it comes from, I think, texting where you just text somebody something and it's like, do you need this? There's no good morning. There's no how are you? There's no, it's just like, okay, well, did you do this? And I get stuff like that. And I'm like, well, hello would be nice. Or how are you? Like, how is some sort of like, something that puts the more humanness into the whole conversation. The fact that, that we're not just texting machines or, just there's a little bit of care that's acknowledged or concern with somebody else.
yeah, people use hyperbole in printed word that to make a point and to overemphasize or even to exaggerate. And at the same time, different people read that differently, and it lands differently with them. But going back to a verbal interaction between you and me, the gear of being more interested in how you're doing in that moment is something I think all of us can work on. The the want and the desire to kind of fill the space with talk and more of the same said differently would really, I think, would be really cool to say, hey, look, I've obviously got some stuff on my mind. Are you interested in hearing anything more about it, or maybe giving me a hand with it? I mean, that would be more authentic than, trying to explain away a behavior that's totally inexplicable. And in that moment of saying, look, I just was very, very bad with you. And I would really like you to understand. I think I did that because I trust you. I can be myself with you. I can be inappropriate and you'll forgive me. And I hope I didn't, overstay my welcome with that last little bit. Would you like to give me a hand and give me some feedback? And I'll try to tell you and put into words what's going on. I don't even know if I can succeed at doing that, but could we have that conversation? See, this is an awake person. You know what I mean? This is the Renee Brown, uh, that person who's basically going to say, I don't have language to communicate to anyone what's going on for me right now. Are you willing to work with me for a minute or two so I can change how it feels for me? Is that okay with you? And that person can accept or decline. Gladly make time for you on Tuesday, but at the moment I've got my eyeballs full of the same kind of crap that I think you've got. So I'm not going to be much help to you right at the moment.
No, I mean, I think so. I think that's, I mean, I do like quite a bit of what you're saying. Yeah, I'm just sitting with this idea of, and sometimes I don't really know that it is the fact that people don't want it. It's just, you know, they're busy, at the moment, and maybe they can't drop something. So it's like, I would love to hear it, but at this moment, and now you don't want it to sound bad. You say something like, I want to be able to give you all my attention. Like, I want to be able to listen, to really listen to what you share.
Yeah.
Because then I think it brings in the element of, like, right now, I just, I won't be able to do that right now. If you want me to, like, I can listen, but I won't be able to contribute and share much.
Yeah. I mean, whatever is authentically there for you. I think when you and I can stare each other in the eye and we can basically say, I hear a lot of hurt in your voice. I don't know if I can stand a lot more hurt in my life right at the moment. Is there someone else that I can help you get in touch with? Or who do you think would be, if it weren't me, who else would you really feel like you could open up to? Because today I'm really not there for me, let alone you. It could be anything. It could be, shoot, what do you got? Or it could be a whole flip the script. Holy crap, I didn't even say hello to you. How are you? What do you need? You need a smile, a kiss, a hug, or what?
That's right.
Or all of the above?
All the above. Some days are definitely like that. All the above.
Absolutely. What if we had a curriculum, at all school kids, 5th and 6th grade had to take, it's called How to Be a Better Friend.
Mhm.
What are the characteristics of a better friend? Who do you need to be? What person needs to show up when there's a possibility that a friend of yours is in need? Because everybody lines up after someone has a really bad accident. They feel awful. There's not a darn thing they can do about it. And boy, this just so leads into what we talk about at the end of every broadcast, that fifth and sixth graders at the latest, maybe even first and second graders. How can we teach people to be better people for each other?
I was thinking about that because I went to, recently, and I was thinking about just this idea of the relationships that I have with the few people that, let's say my close, who I consider really close friends, or we've been through different life situations together, like that, not together, and that we're going through the same circumstance, and that each one of us has had, let's say, major life issues
Yeah.
happen within our own lives, and how we were there for each other. And a few things come to mind. Why those relationships for me have worked so well. And I think when you feel at home within yourself, like when you feel comfortable within yourself, then you don't like, what they do, what they do doesn't feel threatening to you personally.
Yes.
So you don't have that, you're not like, you don't have that, your guard up. You're not in that sort of like fight or flight kind of mode. Like you have to protect yourself in some way, or you have to defend yourself in some way. So you have a strong ability to sit there and say, okay, like this is who I am, not in a brag, whatever, but this is who I am, good and bad. You know, this is who I am. And then when you're from that place, I just had this it was just on, and I said that when you're from that place, I think there is this space where there is a place where one is maybe because you had to practice it with yourself. So there is that element of compassion that comes through because you had to be compassionate with yourself, of understanding because you had to be understanding to yourself, forgiveness because you had to forgive yourself at some point. And then you can be that for other people. Like I look at it like, some of my strong, close relationships. And I thought to myself, like, if I wasn't forgiving, understanding, and then for me, then, you know, the relationship would have ended far long ago. Or it would be like a lot of other relationships I have that are just not that like that,
Yep.
but I think you need to have that. I think it requires all those things. And I think some of it is an education of like, let's say, you know, when, you're having like as a kid, like you have a friend who like, cancels on you or who, I don't know, does something. It's being like a little bit like, having that understanding for somebody else
Sure.
and giving somebody else the benefit of the doubt, you know? And then,
Absolutely love what you're saying. I really do, because the Shakespearean "to thine own self be true" doesn't mean tell the truth to yourself. It means know yourself.
mm-hmm,
It means stand up for yourself. Be in a position where other people don't have a capacity to diminish you in a moment, where you will be able to rise to an occasion that's not really experienced very often, and do it with power. Do it with the ability to make choices in a difficult moment. And I think that's training that's worthwhile, don't you?
yeah. I mean, I think, like to your phrase, to know thyself, like to really, I think that in that phrase, my word for the year, which was acceptance, to know yourself and to accept yourself. And not in the fact that, like, okay, well, this is who I am. And so that's just who I am. I mean, I think that you can do that and still always work to change. It's not like, you can sit there and say, okay, well, this is something that, or, this is not a strength of mine. And but you can still work to be better than that. And so I think it's knowing yourself and then accepting yourself. Because I think that, we spend far too, I don't know. If you don't know yourself and you don't accept yourself, I think one is you live in a world, and I did this for far too long, Um, you live in a world where you have this idea about yourself and you have to maintain whatever that ideal is. And that is not sustainable at all.
Well, I hear you talking about that ego that you have to protect.
That's
The
right. You have
ego
Mhm.
the ego, which is not true, okay?
Right,
It's your
exactly.
story about what you think people want you to be or what you think works about yourself, but it's not true.
It's not true.
But when you get into a situation where you've long ago fallen in love with yourself for everything you are and everything you're not, it's not important to define what you are. It's not important to define what you're not. You live life finding out what the next moment calls you to be.
Love
You're
that.
spending no time at all worrying about what you were. You're spending all of your time dwelling on the information and input, new data that's coming in right now, and processing that through whatever experiences and training you've had. And at the same time, being willing to be wrong, being willing to experiment and try different things out in the moment, which means that you never have to end a friendship over a misspoke sentence because you know how to love yourself for everything that you are and everything that you're not. That may be very, very powerful in loving other people for everything they are and everything they're not.
So I'm going to go back to this phrase, like, because I always had a hard time with that phrase, love yourself. I mean, literally, I would sit there and I would be like, if I was on, if I wasn't on camera and I'm on camera with you, I would sit there and go like that gag. It would be like, like that kind of. But then long ago, my phrase was, and we started out like part of this conversation with how could we teach kids to be good friends to each other. I thought to myself, could I befriend myself? Like, I may
100%.
not love myself and all that in all the aspects of myself, but I could befriend myself and be a friend to myself. And so that's the way I always invite people to do it because I feel like sometimes telling people, like, just love yourself or you should practice self love, people kind of look at you and they're like, you've got to be kidding, kind of
Well,
thing.
our
But
culture is equating that with love your ego.
love
Okay,
your ego. Right. No, I mean,
that's
I
not what we're talking about here.
know, but I
There's a
could.
core essential part of your being that's never been here before, will never be here again.
That's
Love
right.
that.
Love that. And then also, I mean, I'm like, if you can't, and there are parts of each of us which we really, I have parts of myself I really wish rather to not exist. But I I realize that they make up who I am, it's a part of me. And I may not like it, but I can be friends with it. I can even sit there and say, "Oh, it's you again." Like, "Oh, like, hi." You're rearing your head right now. You're like making yourself known. You know?
I thought I'd trained you out of existence. What the hell are you doing here?
That's right. It's also like the same thing when you have a reaction or you respond to something or something affects you and you're like, "I'm not over this yet." That's always been a big one of mine. Maybe because I was told that at certain points about certain things in my life. You still, you still haven't given that up. You're still, that still bothers you.
Some things are like that. They persist.
They persist. And, if anything, I learned that, I learned quite, in the last few years, the more you try to push them away and wish they weren't there, the more they show up. And if you could just allow them to be there and they don't hold as much power, and they
Right.
just, you're not overly focused on them.
Very interesting.
Hmm. But to your point, to go back for a second, but is like, and so, like, if you're teaching kids how to be good friends, so first of all, I think that you need to lead by, kids learn by example.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, how do you treat people? And, I was talking, and I was talking to one of my students this morning whose granddaughter must be about 5 or 6. And she was saying that for the first, I guess for preschool, she went to a Waldorf school, and how the focus is very much on kindness and love and the fact, like, you know, the sacredness of the earth and the appreciation of our planet. Like, it's very holistic. And now
Hmm.
she's in public school, and the difference she sees, and not so much because her son and daughter-in-law kind of are very much like, this is not acceptable behavior kind of thing,
Right.
but how just the different environment and being around, I guess, probably obviously lots of different kids from lots of different families and backgrounds or whatever, how drastically different it is. And I think, we were talking about it because as far as parenting goes, and I think that unless we as adults kind of navigate this world, it's very hard to expect the children, to do any different. Because children learn by example. And if they're exposed to people who don't treat people well, or who say nasty and cruel things, who pick on, let's say, people that are, you know, whatever, I'm going to use those to pick on people who are disabled or physically challenged or mentally challenged. Like, if you do that, that's what they see. And that's what they're going to do.
The whole notion of being a better friend, that's worth investigating. Because sometimes being a better friend is not listening to somebody telling you their story that you've heard 100 times. Sometimes to be a really better friend, sometimes you got to say, I'm suspicious that you're going to talk me into something that you can't change. And you know what? I don't believe that for a minute. I know you're a powerful human being, and I know you can change anything that you set your mind to. You want to have that conversation? I'm in for it. You want to tell me, how the world's out to get you? You know, don't have time for it. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, I used to find it very, very hard to listen to when people would call me and complain about the same, like, health concern all the time, but not be willing to do anything about it.
Right.
And, and I'm okay if you want help, if you want me to give you ideas, if you even take action on something, but not doing anything or not giving anything a chance in addition.
Right.
You know, I mean, I can listen to you, but eventually what ends up happening is that you listen and you turn off. It's like you're not really listening. It's like, hearing the noise in the background, it just becomes background noise because you know that no matter what you say isn't going to make a difference.
It's like the Charlie Brown parents. Wah 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 wah.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it takes an awake person to be able to stand on their hind legs and say, "Look, I'm already not listening to you. Let's talk about something else, or let's talk, another time when you're in better headspace."
And then there's just like, when I smile because I really don't mind when she does it, but my mother's always like when she gets on and she complains and she's like, look at me, I'm always complaining. And I'm like, Ma, you're not always complaining. I think that's it's very much on her mind. So it's just so funny. And I'm like, you really don't always complain. You really don't. It just makes me smile. And I think I'm also just very thankful that she's here. So it never bothers me because I realize, you know, that she won't be here forever. So I'm like willing to like just like I just doesn't bother me at all, but it always makes me smile when she says it.
It's funny. It's funny. Um, I had a really, really good friend, 50 years ago. Guy actually moved in with Jan and me, before we got married, we lived in this house. Um, Actually after we got married, but he was our neighbor across the street. We got to be really good friends during the blizzard of 78. And so, we would drink beer with each other, and this guy was somebody. He was a PhD chemistry student at UConn, writing his FUD. His dad was the CEO of Clairol. Yeah, that Clairol. Okay. And the really neat part of it was, very staunch Jewish family. And, he'd say, I was in Beersheba on a kibbutz, and I did this and I did that and the other thing. And he said, I've found it no matter where in the world. How can you tell if a Jew's alive? They're complaining. And I said, Bob, you can say that. He said, no, it'd be more funny if you said it, Bill. And I said, Bob, you got to realize we're all Jews. You just described the human condition. How do we know someone's alive? They're complaining. But,
Yeah.
if you read any part of the Bible, we're all from the same place.
We're all from the same place. No, but it's funny that you said that because just that whole idea of we're alive, we're complaining. And so when you said that, I was like, oh, maybe that's why, because it reminds me that my mom's here and I'm so thankful she's here and never take that for granted. So, yeah.
That's the brilliance of being awake and being alive. You can choose to hear wah, wah, wah like a symphony.
That's right.
Because
Exactly.
that's the thing you're going to miss about, your loved one when they're not around anymore, or just when they go away, you don't hear that any longer. That was like a constant.
Well, it's interesting that you said that because when I was on this morning, my student was saying that a really close friend of hers just lost her dog in March,
Oh,
and so she works from home, and so now the house, because he was always there with her when she worked, like he was always there. So now all of a sudden the house seems really empty, and so she has this recording of barking because she said that it used to be that her dog's barking drove her nuts, but now all of a sudden that's what she misses. She misses that. So she's been playing like either his bark or another dog's bark or whatever. And so as
yeah.
you said that background noise where all of a sudden that's the thing you miss the most is, that are the really endearing things. It's like you think about the fact that no matter what, Tonka still gets the spoon that he whatever, and he takes because I give it to him and he takes it out of the bowl and he carries it a few feet and then he licks it clean and everything. And so it used to be I would find spoons outside, like because he would carry them outside. I would find them in different parts of the house, that last spoonful where I'd leave it in the bowl and then all of a sudden, like I'd be like, where is that spoon? And it would be out on the lawn or something. I'd be like, oh, I guess we snuck it out. So things like that, which you are going to remember, and then just different funny circumstances, like you're just sitting there and you're like, and those are the treasures, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, somebody told me early on in my marriage, just you wait. The things that are most upsetting and that you complain about the most, with your spouse, you'll know that when you really love her, those are the things that you find the most endearing.
Mm-hmm.
And now those will be the things that bring immediate laughter between the two of you. And it's really true. I mean, we're coming up on 50 years of marriage, but we lived in sin for a year and a half before that. And it wasn't done back in those days. That was quite different. For us to be so in love with each other that we really didn't give a good rap what our families said or the rest of the world said. And by doing our thing and being unshakable in it, they came around. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's, not necessarily that what or how we did what we did was admirable or anything else. It's just when you've decided that things are really important in your life, you don't have to explain them to other people because other people are not at a point where they can really appreciate them yet. They can't hear you. They don't understand your language.
I mean, I think that that's very true. I think that, at points, people are just not there. And I think that's true for anything, whether it be a personal situation or I think when you, let's say, and I call it innovative, let's say you have an innovative way of thinking about it, which is very much like I shared earlier, sort of outside the box. You
Right.
know, you people aren't ready. My friend Hans always says that what does the body do with a foreign protein? It rejects it. And I think that that's what happens when people are exposed to things that I don't know, maybe they don't believe or they don't understand their first reaction is to reject. Our first reaction is not, oh, well, let me see what this is about in general. Our first reaction is like, oh, this is different than what I'm used to. And I'm going to reject it right now.
Yeah, be like Spock. Fascinating.
Fascinating, right? Interesting. My old friend used to say, so interesting, interesting, very interesting. And then you also could use the word curious, like, oh, curious. I like the word curious better because it kind of brings in this element of playfulness. It's like, oh, curious.
And that's really important. Everything we're talking about assumes that you're interested in having a curious mind. You can't contemplate what we're talking about like a possibility uh, unless you are interested in really exploring your own curious mind.
And I think to that being said, if you talk about kids, Bill, then I think we have to bring back ways that help them cultivate and nurture that curiosity. I
Yeah,
think we kind of stamped it out in so many ways, especially in school, where we force them to sit in one seat and we force them to learn a particular way. I think we have to cultivate that whole idea of curiosity,
absolutely.
curiosity and creativity. And I think if we want to like change, if you talk about educating kids on friends, I think curiosity is a big one. Because if you're curious, then you're interested in other people's cultures and other people's backgrounds, other people's families, if you're curious. And so developing that curiosity is like, yeah. And when I'm standing opposite my baby picture, and I have a baby picture that sits on my sits out, and I'm like, I think I was like a year. I think it was like my year baby picture, maybe a little older. And I have this expression and something that's never changed, which is usually what doesn't change in people's photographs are the eyes. Like usually the eyes are the same. And there's this very curious expression, like kind of like a playfulness, curiosity. And I think to myself, I still have that. Like that has not changed in throughout like everything that's happened. Like, how many ever years. I'm not going to divulge my age at the moment. But yeah, that has not changed. And so I think that we have to nurture creativity and curiosity.
At the moment, I could not possibly agree with you more. And so, how do we put a bow on this conversation for today?
Maybe just even ask a question. Like, I don't know. I would love to like plant a seed and give them almost like I don't want to say homework, but just maybe even reflect on what you feel makes a good friend. Whether that be to you, like, what are the qualities that you look for in a friend? What are the qualities you feel like you bring to a friendship?
I love that.
Mm. I just read an article that was talking about a big study that was done, I think at Harvard, and they were talking about having strong friendships in your 50s. So that was the year that they found was the most influential. Was a very long study. Was I guess had the greatest impact on whether people were well in their 80s.
Interesting.
So, and I had just come off of my friend David gave a class on friendships and what it is, relation, like, community and friendships and what it is about that actually predicts longevity more than almost any other thing. So that might be a conversation for next week.
It's not one of those that you can argue if it's true or not. All you can say is if you see possibility in it.
That's right. And go out and cultivate friendships, because what have you got to lose?
Exactly. Stick your head out. You can either make progress or get it cut off, Well, thank you again for another marvelous conversation, Jan. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, Bill. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And the other thing for friendship is, because I think about this one day, is we have the ability to laugh.
Yes.
We laugh a lot.
Yeah. And if nothing else, I've learned one very powerful thing in our conversations over the last 3 or 4 years. And that is, what we disagree on more often than not is terminology. What we agree on is practically everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's true. We call or we interpret words differently, but the basic idea is all the same. Pretty
much. Gives you a different way of approaching the world and a different way of listening and interacting. And I appreciate that. You've helped me grow up an awful lot in my conversation.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Thank you. Likewise. And I think you're right, because I think when, we had this conversation with a friend not too long ago, and we were talking about values. And, and it was basically when you share common values, then, and sometimes the words get caught, or we talk about, we don't have the words for something. Right. And I think if you can get beyond the actual words sometimes, then there's a lot shared. It's just based on our experience. We interpret the world through our own words and through the words that we've kind of received.
Love it. Absolutely. So would you like to give our invitation?
So, like I said, go out and ask yourself, what makes up a friend? Are you a good friend? And then reach out to a friend.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, we are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Correll, here with Jan Jeremias yet again. So please go out into the world, live your best, most glorious life, and then come back and tell us all about it. Goodbye for now.
Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.